Now for many of us, the idea of playing golf when it's freezing cold outside or raining or both isn't overly appealing, but perhaps it's been your equipment that's been letting you down and tarnishing your enjoyment of these winter rounds. So why don't you try one, some, or maybe all of the winter golf gear hacks I'm about to show you in this video filmed at the incredible Ailsa course at Trump Turnberry. Make sure you stick around for number 7, it's an absolute game changer. Let's face it, apart from the feeling in your fingers, what have you got to lose? Now golf is increasingly becoming a power game, and that's something you need to cash in on in the winter by playing a golf ball that's going to give you the most amount of carry distance through the air. We know the fairways are soft, the ball's not going to be running very much after it lands, so you need a golf ball that's going to give you the most amount of carry. There's a few different changes you can make potentially to the ball that you play. So for example, if you typically play Titleist Pro V1, you might want to think about switching into the Titleist Pro V1 X. That is a slightly higher launching, high flying golf ball within the premium range. You could take it a step further. It's something I would definitely recommend is switching to a more distance orientated golf ball, a firmer golf ball like the Titleist Velocity that I've got here, for example. It's going to give you more ball speed. It's going to definitely give you a few more yards through the air. And because the greens are soft, you don't necessarily need that spin control that you get from a premium cover. The ball's not going to be releasing out when you're chipping and hitting iron shots into the green. So you can afford to make that switch into a distance golf ball and not suffer that trade-off that you would typically get during the summer months. So it would be remiss of me to not have a go with this Titleist Velocity golf ball here, the beautiful 10th hole on the Ailsa course at Trump Turnberry. Obviously, you know, when you're making a stroke, you can definitely afford to tee it a little bit higher in the winter, get that ball up in your stance. That's going to encourage a little bit more height off the tee to give you the most amount of carry distance. Yeah, don't overdo it, but those are some changes you can also make to your setup. Let's see if we can get this one flying high and straight down the fairway. Oh, it's a little bit left. Just hugging the edge of that ocean there. Not ideal, but those are some simple changes to your golf ball you can make to give you more carry distance and therefore get further down the fairway and get lower scores in the winter. Now in the winter, when the ground's soft, it can make chipping around the green a more of a difficult task because the leading edge just wants to dig a little bit more into the ground. The margin for error is quite small, maybe less so on a links course like we have here on the Ailsa course at Trump Turnberry, but generally speaking, you want to try and increase the margin for error when you're chipping around the green. And one way you can do that with your equipment is to switch to a higher bounce wedge when you're chipping. Something I definitely do in the winter. I've got a 12 degrees of bounce wedge here. That's a lot higher than I would typically play. Obviously, bounce being the distance between the leading edge and the bottom of the sole. So if you have a little bit more bounce there, that's going to encourage the club to dig a little bit less and just skid across the turf rather than dig down into it with that leading edge. You can see here, you don't want to be taking divots when you're chipping if you can avoid them. So a little bit more bounce should increase the margin for error when you're chipping on these soft conditions that you get in the winter. See here how the club just sort of skimmed along the top, not much divot there. That's what you want when you're chipping. But if you haven't got a high bounce wedge, you don't want to switch the wedge in your equipment in terms of investing in a new wedge. One way you can add more bounce is to open the club face. So another thing I like to do in the winter, obviously because the greens are soft, you can afford to play a slightly lower trajectory shot. So what I tend to do is I tend to get a slightly lower lofted wedge, like a pitching wedge, and just open the face of it. And opening the face of your wedge will expose a bit more bounce. So you still get the sort of same effect without having to buy a new wedge. You still get that sort of skidding motion. And obviously with a pitching wedge, it's going to come out a little bit flatter. You still get a little bit of spin, but because the greens are softer, it's still hopefully not going to run away from you as much. I've hit that a little bit too hard, but you get the idea. You can see here, again, similar divot, nice skidding motion through the turf. Definitely one to practice. If you don't want to buy a new wedge, chip with a lower lofted wedge, open the face a little bit, expose more bounce, and that should increase your margin for error when you're chipping around the green. But don't underestimate the importance of the humble golf tee in the winter. Now, luckily here on the Ailsa course at Trump Turnberry, we're still off grass, but the majority of golf courses in the winter will be off mats, and that's where the castle tee or egg timer tee can really come in handy. I've got a couple here. The benefits of using an egg timer tee is that you get a consistent tee height every time, so that should help you contact the ball on the driver face in a similar position and just give you a consistent launch and flight and make it a bit more predictable. And you can get them in different heights, which is really useful. So for example, I would use a purple tee for a driver if I just want to hit a sort of normal driver that's going to keep the ball in play. but then you've got the option of switching to an orange one, which is a little bit higher. If you want a bit more distance, if the fairway's a bit more open, you want to really open your shoulders, switch to a higher egg timer tee in this orange one. You've got that flexibility to absolutely bomb one when you want to. So definitely recommend switching to castle tees in the winter, more consistency, and you've got that flexibility of altering the trajectory depending on the hole. Just a quick break to remind you, if you are enjoying this video, do click the like button, it really helps us out. And don't forget to subscribe to the Golf Monthly YouTube channel so you don't miss any of our videos. Have you done it? Good. Right, let's move on. Now in the winter, the air is colder, the greens are definitely softer, which means the ball, when you're hitting into greens, when it lands, it's not releasing forwards like it would be in the summer, and often it's spinning back a lot more, especially if you're hitting off a mat into a par 3. So one change you could definitely make would be to hit an extra club when you're hitting into greens. And if you look at the Arcos data, it tells us that every ability of golfer hits the ball shorter in the winter versus the summer. For a scratch golfer, they're around about 4% shorter on average. So off the tee, they're losing about 11 yards, which is a pretty significant difference. That difference does come down as the handicap ability goes up and the swing speed comes down, but definitely something to think about. You're generally going to be a lot shorter in the winter than you would be in your summer yardages. So, for example, on this particular shot here, I know in the summer, if I absolutely flush a 9-iron, I could probably get it to pin high, but we're in the winter, it's a little bit colder, there's a little bit of wind around, and we know that I'm gonna hit this a little bit shorter. Maybe I'm not swinging it as far because I've got a few layers on, so going an extra club is always a good idea. So I'd go from a 9-iron to my 8-iron. And obviously when you think about most holes, the trouble on most holes, generally speaking, tends to be short of the green on that front portion of the green. So if we can get our approach shots to the middle of the green, even maybe the back half of the green, it's going to take the trouble out of play as well. So club up, make a committed swing, and hopefully you take the trouble out of play, and that will help your scores come down. So there you go, I've got it to the middle of the green there, taking the trouble out of play. Definitely something to think about in the winter. Clubbing up should help you lower your scores. Now, generally speaking, when we play in the winter, maybe not in the case of a links golf course like this, but typically fairways in the winter are quite muddy. And when you hit approach shots, iron shots, wedge shots, the faces on your clubs can get very dirty. And if you get dirt and moisture on your club base and you leave that on there, that's going to provide issues with inconsistent spin, maybe even the start line of your golf shot as well. So it's really important in the winter, if you want as much consistency as possible, make sure after every approach shot, you give your iron a good clean with a dry towel, just to get all the moisture and the loose dirt off. But also, another good tip is to invest in a groove cleaner like I've got here. Just give those grooves a clean. You can see the amount of dirt that comes out there. And that's just going to make sure you get that consistent spin on every shot. With an iron shot, we're trying to hit the ball a specific distance and trying to encourage as much predictability as possible. Having clean grooves for every shot is going to increase the chances of that happening. So invest in the groove cleaner, give your iron faces a good clean after every approach shot, wedge shot, chip shot, and that should help your results around the green or the shots into greens become a bit more predictable. Right, unless your driver is made of wood and is older than old Tom Morris, it should have some loft adjustability on it. And that's something to really take advantage of in the winter, because adding a bit of loft to your driver can definitely help increase your carry distance in the winter, something that's really important. So make sure you've got a wrench at home, you can adjust the settings on your driver, but make sure you do some research online in terms of making sure you get the loft adjustment just right. And be careful, because when you're tweaking loft, it can also alter the face angle depending on the manufacturer of driver you've got. So maybe consult with a PGA Pro, do some research online, but there's definitely going to be a setting on your hosel that you can take advantage of to give you a bit more loft, and that should therefore give you a little bit more carry distance. When it's cold outside, the temptation is to add lots of layers to keep you warm, but obviously the more layers you add, the more restriction you're going to be potentially adding to your swing. It's going to reduce the speed, and that's something that you don't want to do in the winter. The ball's already not going as far as it was in the summer, so adding lots of bulky layers could reduce distance even further, and that's going to add complications to your round. So one tactic I like to go for, if I can get away with it, if it's not ridiculously cold, is to go for the base layer vest or gilet combination. So this is a really good way of keeping yourself warm, but also giving your arms as much range of motion to swing completely freely. So if you can get away with it in the winter, a base layer, warm gilet or vest combination can allow you to swing completely freely, and hopefully you won't lose as much distance, and therefore you haven't got to make any sort of complicated calculations in terms of adjusting your club distances depending on the shot in hand. So if you can, make some smart choices around the clothing that you wear, and that should help your winter round be a bit more enjoyable. Right, come here, I've got a great tip for you to take advantage of preferred lies in the winter. We know in the winter most golf courses give you preferred lies when you're in the fairway, so you can really use that to your advantage, especially if you play a golf ball that has a line on it or some alignment help on it, like I've got here in the TP5X stripe golf ball. So obviously you pick it up, mark the ball, pick it up, you're allowed to clean it, and then if you've got those visual lines on there, you can use it to align the line onto your target. So whether that's the flag, or if there's some wind around, maybe slightly left or right of the flag, just use it to give you a little bit more visual assistance for your club face, because I think I'm certainly someone who doesn't hit their wedge shots as close as I would like. So it's going to give you a really good visual on your start line, your alignment. It's going to give you a lot of help, just allows you to be a bit more freer, just swing on the line of the ball. And obviously you can use it not just on your approach shots, you can use it off the tee, you can use it on the green, of course, when you're putting as well. And let's face it, in the winter, when the tees are forward, you're probably going to have quite a lot of wedge shots into the green. So if you're someone that doesn't hit your wedge shots as close as you want, use this when you're preferring the lie. It might well help you hit your approach shots a little bit closer. Now in the winter, we know the ground conditions can get very wet and slippery, which can obviously increase the risk of injury if you're slipping over, but also when you're playing from sloping lies, you don't want your feet moving around. That's going to produce inconsistent strikes and generally bad shots. So one way you can negate that and often increase the longevity of your golf shoes is to replace the cleats. If you've got an old pair of spike shoes that are looking a bit worse for wear, you could add some new spikes to your shoes. I've got some Soft Spikes Tour Flex Pro cleats here. I haven't got the wrench to insert them into my shoes at the moment, but obviously your Pro should have a wrench that you can therefore replace the cleats on your shoes. They're pretty inexpensive to do that, and they can really add a year or so to your golf shoes. If they're still waterproof, adding some fresh cleats will give you a lot more grip. It'll give you that confidence that you can swing with complete freedom, knowing that your feet aren't going to slip out from under you when you're making your shot in the winter. The extra grip's really invaluable. A little bit safer as well, so definitely recommend in the winter investing in a new set of cleats. It will definitely add a year or two to your golf shoes. Now, while there's little evidence to show that hot golf balls tend to go further than sort of normal temperature golf ball, there is a little bit of evidence out there that suggests that cold golf balls don't go as far as a normal temperature golf ball. So where you can, I would recommend putting your golf ball in your pocket, to keep them sort of as close to your body temperature as possible. I'll even pop them in your mittens. That's another good idea, which I could do here. You can also get those sort of strap-on hand warmers that sort of rest on your belly. They're a good way to keep your hands warm. Pop your ball in there as well. That should hopefully stop the temperature of the golf ball reducing, and therefore reducing the risk of the ball potentially not going as far off the tee or into greens. And that should hopefully give you a little bit more consistency in your distances. So there you have it, that concludes our look at the 10 winter golf gear hacks you could try to hopefully save a shot or two off your scores this off-season. Big thank you to the Elsa course here at Tramp Turnberry for hosting us. Some big changes happening here coming next year, really exciting. But that's all from me, I'll see you next time.